Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday, and welcome to this live webinar that is being organised as part of the Driving Positive Change, the Importance of Being Bold and Resilient landmark lecture brought to you by Spring Pod. Just a few housekeeping bits and pieces to get out of the way before we do dive in. This talk should last for around an hour. Please don't forget to use the Q&A function to ask questions of our guest today. I'm sure he would love to answer them. And it's also why he's here, so please milk that opportunity. Just keep in mind, due to the number of questions that normally do come through, we may not get a chance to answer every single one of them. But if a question pops up that you also wanted to ask, you can use the upvote function, which looks like a little thumbs up button. We'll be choosing from those top voted questions to ask of our guest today. If for any reason you need to leave the webinar halfway or you end up missing the webinar completely, we do have you covered. We do record all of our webinars and aim to have them uploaded within 24 hours so you can come back and watch on demand. So in today's webinar, we're going to be talking about LSEC Landmark Lecture with Hugh Brasher. Hugh, please join me on the screen. Oh, there we go. We're on.
We're on. Sorry. Press the button twice. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, Hugh. How are you doing?
Very good. Very good. Looking forward to 4 hours or 3 hours, 58 minutes time with the kickoff tonight for the big game.
Well, we are very, very lucky to have you here and taking time out of your busy schedule to be here to chat to us today. The floor is totally yours. So take it away, Hugh.
Thank you. So good afternoon. And I'm going to start with a story. And like all good stories, this one starts in a pub. It was a pub in Richmond. And my old man, my father, was there with one of his best friends having a pint. And he'd had a pint after a run. And, you know, he enjoyed running, but he enjoyed drinking. The two do go hand in hand, I can assure you. Other members of the running club were coming in, and they had just come back from New York. And they'd just come back from New York because they'd run the New York Marathon. And this was 1979. Actually, it was 1978. And they'd been to this city then, the gun crime capital city of the world. Hard to believe, but in the late 70s, New York was murder city. They'd been to that city and they'd done this run, this race, this marathon, the New York City Marathon. And they were waxing lyrically about this amazing event. And my father was like, yeah. Like, as far as he was concerned, running in the streets of a city, he couldn't think of anything worse. Not because he wasn't a runner, he was. He was actually an Olympic gold medalist. And that behind me, by the way, is the running vest that he wore when he won his Olympic gold medal in Melbourne in 1956. But the fact, running on the streets, he loved the wilds, he loved the mountains. So why on earth would he go for 26.2 miles to New York and run on the streets? However, they went on and on and on, to the extent that in the end, he was also a journalist. He decided he had to go. He went and he had what he called an epiphany. He felt like Saul on the road to Damascus. So a blinding light, and that he had seen something. And what did he see? What did he feel? He felt a world coming together, a city that was torn apart, a multicultural city, but together on that day, rather than tearing each other apart, they were united together. And that city was united together, supporting 20,000 people running 26.2 miles. And those 20,000 people weren't elite runners. They were just everyday people like you, like me, like your friend, like your family, like your colleagues. They were just everyday people, but they were being cheered every single step of the way by the crowd of New York and this multicultural society coming together and willing them to complete that crazy 26.2 mile journey. So he thought big, he thought bold. He was with his best friend, John Disley, who, by the way, was favorite for the Olympic gold medal in 1956, but on the day came fifth. And together they decided, or they asked the question. And the question that they asked is, or what they knew was that London had the course. London, the city, definitely had the course, but did it have the heart? Did it have the soul to truly welcome the world in the way that New York City did? They asked that question. They asked it publicly. My father, as I said, was a journalist, and he wrote that in a paper called The Observer in 1979. 16 months later, the first London Marathon was born. In March 1981, 6,000 people on the streets of London, supported by hundreds of thousands of people who had never watched a marathon before, cheered everyday people on that incredible 26.2 mile journey. Now, 40 years later, the London Marathon is the greatest marathon in the world. It is the greatest, not just because of the course, not just because the best runners in the world come to compete on that day, but quite simply because the heart and the soul of London, of Britain, comes out on that day and cheers those runners every step of that way. And those runners doing those 26.2 miles get an experience that they will never get in their lives at any other time. None of us have the opportunity to be at Wembley this evening in Harry Kane's shoes. We're not going to get 60,000 people cheering our name. Well, actually, you can. If you put your name on that T-shirt, on that vest, you will have more than 60,000 every step of the way. It will be one of the most emotional experiences you have had in your life. I can guarantee you it will also be one of the most painful, but you will reflect upon it afterwards and want to come back for more. So what did they dream? They dreamt of a world where London came together, where it showed its heart and its soul. And now the London Marathon has raised over £1 billion. The runners taking part have raised over £1 billion for good causes. More than 1 million people have taken part. And it truly is the world's biggest street party, where 40,000 people just happen to be running 26.2 miles. So that is the story of the London Marathon. And it's a story of great success. But then what happened in 2020 in Wuhan? A pandemic, something that started, it wasn't even said to be a pandemic until the World Health Organization said that on the 30th of January 2020. What did we then have? Something absolutely unimaginable. The 23rd of March, we all go into a lockdown where we do not go out of our houses, where we are speaking to each other in this environment, on Zoom, on Teams, where our education for a load of people has stopped. For those lucky enough to have computers, lucky enough to have universities or schools that could immediately switch, for those lucky enough, some education continued. But all of a sudden, we entered a world that none of us could have imagined. So there we are, a mass participation organizer in a world you can't mass. So what do you do? Do you panic? Do you say, there's nothing I can do? I don't believe you do. I believe you plot, you plan, you think through different scenarios, you get ideas from different people, you listen to other people, you use your network to get ideas. And what did we do? That is exactly what we did. Within 48 hours, we had 13 different ways of organizing the London Marathon in later that year. And what we'd already done was move the London Marathon from a date in April to a date in October. And we did that at 13 days notice. So we announced that the London Marathon would not be happening in April 2020 on the 13th of March, Friday the 13th of March. Always remember that time and that date, Friday the 13th, unlucky for some. But through the network we had created, a network of the BBC, our broadcast partner, the Mayor of London, Transport for London, the Royal Parks, all the boroughs that we run through, Canary Wharf, we asked them, would they allow us to move the marathon to a new date? So we used our resilience, we used our network, and we made that announcement. So we then had a new date, and we came up with 12, 13 different ways of organizing it. Did we know whether we would be able to? 100%? No. But we planned for every single one of those scenarios. And in the end, it got to end of July, the beginning of August. The pandemic was not panning out in the way that anyone had predicted in March. Unfortunately, we had to say that we could not run the London Marathon in its normal way. But what we did in 8 weeks, in only 8 weeks, we still ran our 40th race, getting elite athletes from around the world, chartering a plane from Kenya and from Ethiopia to get the elite athletes here. And we ran the London Marathon around St. James's Park. So that for those of you that know it, it's less than 2 miles round centre of London. And we created an app with our partner TCS. We created an app where people could run the London Marathon from their homes, their way, with running numbers on the front and the back of them. And the BBC covered this. It got 8 hours and 20 minutes of live TV coverage, the most TV coverage the London Marathon had ever had. Not only that, that program was up for a BAFTA. That's quite incredible. If someone said to me something that we were producing, the team here at the London Marathon were producing with the BBC would be up for a BAFTA, I would have said they were absolutely crazy. And those people who downloaded the app, we still got 37,966 people to run those 26.2 miles from their homes, listening to the sounds of Paula Radcliffe and Steve Cram. As they went on their running journey, they heard the sounds that London, the crowd, through the app, and they heard the encouraging words of Steve and Paula, to the point that we got feedback that actually they were in tears, not of pain, but of joy at being connected to a community of runners doing this. And Britain came out and supported them. In their communities, with their running numbers front and back, people were shouting and cheering for them, knowing they were still on that journey, that 26.2 mile journey, doing it their way that was appropriate for a pandemic. That was one of the most incredible things that this team at London Marathon events have ever done, and I know that I have ever done. And what has that led to? Quite unbelievably, it has led to up to 100,000 people this year doing the London Marathon. 50,000, up to 50,000 doing it from Greenwich to Westminster, and up to 50,000 doing it in their homes, from their homes, in their communities. And that has made our event more inclusive than it has ever been, because people have 23 hours, 59 minutes and 59 seconds to do that 26.2 miles from their homes. They can do it the way they want to do it. And it has created a new event within an event, and has truly made the impact that we can have on inspiring activity, which is our vision. We want to inspire activity in all ages, all abilities, all disabilities, all communities, all ethnicities. And by having a hybrid event, it has opened up the London Marathon to more people than ever before. So that's the story of, very quickly, of 40 years. It's the story of a pub conversation that led to the greatest marathon in the world, the largest virtual marathon in the world, and what will be this year, the biggest marathon in the world. And if you think that in order to lead the organization, you would need to go to university, don't, because I didn't. What I have is an attitude, and anyone will tell you, who probably knows me, that it is an attitude, but a belief in doing good, a belief in my ability, and a desire to learn. So what I'm going to leave you with is my 10 tips to getting on in business life. If you remember one of them, brilliant. But these are the things that have helped me be successful. So, firstly, my exam grades were terrible, right? I did A levels, I got a C, an E, and an O. So in those days, it was the bottom grade you could get was an O. So you weren't good enough, you got another O level. So I got a C, an E, and an O. But that didn't define me. I do remember sitting on the loo, opening the envelope, reading it and going, oh, is that a D? Oh no, I think it's an O. But that didn't define me. My attitude and my values define me. And my values, without a doubt, are hard work, excellence. You get out of something what you put into it. I come from a sports background. We are in the most amazing sporting week at the moment. We have Wimbledon going on. We have one of the most important football games tonight, England against Denmark. We have Mark Cavendish going for Eddie Merckx's record that has stood since the 1980s of 34 wins in the Tour de France. He's going for that at the moment. Not today, not on the course, not going up Ventoux twice, but we have the most amazing sports going on. And I came from a sporting background, and sport teaches you, I believe, the more that you put in, the more that you get out. And what you should do in your work life is work out what your values are and find a company and a bunch of people who share those values. If you have shared values, you will get through any adversity that there is. And by the way, there's my lights going off. I haven't been moving around enough. I'm not here to give relationship advice, but I'm going to. It's also brilliant if you find your partner who shares your values. Because again, whatever happens in life, if you have shared values, you can always go back to them. So get your values. I would always say experience beats qualifications. So in my school, there were 250 people in my year. I was one of only 2 people that didn't go to university. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but all I knew is I didn't want to go to university. I believed that if I went head to head against someone that had been to university and I had 3 years work experience, I'd beat them with that 3 years work experience. The learning that I would have got would really make a difference. If you are going for a job, prepare for an interview. And that might sound the most obvious thing to do, but I had a retail chain of shops. I built a chain up from 1 shop to 43 and sold it. And I probably in that time interviewed more than 3,000 staff. So I can assure you, I have been in a lot of interviews. There are some really simple things. Research the company you're working for. Look at what the advert says and write a letter and reply to that advert in that letter. Make sure that when you're doing it, you do know the company you're going for. The company I worked for was called Sweatshop. The company that I built up was called Sweatshop. And I always remember my first question was always, why is it that you would like to join the company? And the answer came back, because I've always wanted to work for JD Sports. Might be a great company, might have done a lot better than mine did. It's not a great answer to the first question. So prepare for that interview. The next one is, if you don't understand anything that someone says, ask a question. My favorite line is, could you say that again in a different way? Because if you say, can you repeat that? If you didn't understand it the first time, you're probably not going to understand it a second time. So I just asked, could you repeat that in a second way? And in a different way. And it is amazing that someone then, as long as they're listening, reframes the answer or the question. And for me, it opens my mind up. I'm able to hear what they've said differently. Whatever you do, surround yourself with great people. Here at the London Marathon, there's a team of 80 great people. They're the ones that have done the work. They're the ones that have made the London Marathon great. They're the ones who, in 8 weeks, designed the course, got the timing systems, got the cars, flew the people from, they didn't actually fly the planes, but arranged for the planes to be chartered, arranged testing of COVID, and did stuff that nobody else in the world was doing. So surround yourself with great people. And if you really want to get on, put yourself out there. Volunteer, engage, speak to people. As I said very early on, your network, the people that you engage with, they'll help you learn, they'll help you develop. Always speak to them properly and make sure that you do that, because you never know when you're going to want their help. And I have a great quote, one quote I want to give you, which is from an amazing golfer, someone potentially came from this golfer called Gary Player. You wouldn't know him, was in the 70s, one of the best players in the world. And after his ball, he hit a shot over 100 yards, went in the hole. And, Percy was playing with, I can't believe how lucky you are. And his response was, yeah, it's quite amazing. The more I practice, the luckier I get. And that is the reality. The more that you put yourself out, some people say, oh, you're lucky. No, you put yourself out there. You go and put yourself in the right position by talking to the right people and surrounding yourself with the right people. That way you make your own luck. One of the key words and one of the key things that we all suffer from is stress. So how can you deal with stress? And for me, it's very, very simple. Focus on what you can control, not what you can't. So many people worry about all the things that they can't control. So try and reframe the problem. Reframe it in a way, there was nothing that we could do to control what was going on with the pandemic. We had no idea, and still don't, what's going to happen next week. But what we can do is have so many different scenarios that whatever happens, we've got another plan. So really focus on what you can control. And then my final one, and this is before any questions and answers, my final one is whatever you do in your work in the future, do something you love. You're going to spend half your waking life at work. If you're asleep for 8 hours, you're awake for 16. Of that, 8 of those hours will be at work. Maybe a whole lot of time will be commuting to and from work. Maybe it won't in the world that we're living in now. But half your waking time is at work. So do something you love. It's then not work. It really isn't. This is not work. This is fun. So if it is something you love, it will feed your soul. And feeding your soul will make you happy. And that, above anything, is what you should try and achieve. So thank you so much for listening. Any questions, please don't hesitate to ask.
Well, I'm kind of speechless. That was brilliant, Hugh. Thank you so much. And thank you for just, yes, again, taking the time out to chat to us today and leave us with all those messages and your 10 tips. I hope everyone wrote those down. You refer back to them. I actually wanted to ask you, did you ever imagine you'd be the event director at the London Marathon?
No, never. I had absolutely no intention. In fact, it would be the last job I wanted to do. I had no idea what I wanted to do when I left school. None. Yep. I went to work in a shop. There was one shop. I built that shop from 1 to 43. In doing that, we actually organised 2 of the biggest road races in the country. We took over organising one in Nottingham, almost through luck again, but it wasn't. It was through putting ourselves in the right position. And I answered an advert in a magazine called Athletics Weekly, and they wanted directors for the London Marathon. And I've got a quite unusual skill set because it's quite specific and not necessarily good for many other jobs. But I answered that advert, and I always remember I got a phone call from, my father had founded this company, but I had nothing to do with it, didn't want to go into it. And he just said, "Are you serious about that application?" I said, "Yeah, because I've never read a job application with a skill set that matched mine." So no, I didn't imagine it. I didn't want to do it. Why did I not want to do it? Because people would think I was just doing it because my father had founded this company or co-founded this company.
Yeah.
Honestly, just my father was an incredible man. He was an Olympic gold medalist.
Yeah.
He was an entrepreneur. He was a journalist. He was the sports editor of The Observer. He was the pacemaker for Sir Roger Bannister in the first sub-4-minute mile. So I'm not him. I can't achieve what he can, but I can still achieve stuff. So no, I didn't, but I am delighted to be doing this job. I love doing this job. We inspire people to get fit, to get healthy, and that, running, activity, sport, it is so good for your soul. And it's just an amazing position to be in.
So you stepped into the role in, was it 2012?
Yeah.
2012. Were there moments where you were like, my God, I can't do this? Obviously, you've overcome them. How do you overcome those moments? Because you're sitting here inspiring all of us. How do you stay motivated? How do you stay inspired?
I think it is this bit about learning and a network. And I'm quite inquisitive. I ask questions and I try and absorb a lot of information. And whenever there's a problem in terms of, I can't do it, well, I know there's someone else that's done it. There is someone else out there. That is the reality of the situation. There are no more brilliant, unique ideas. Very, very few. It's just what you do is take someone else's ideas and tweak it. I call value engineering. So do it a bit better, a bit cheaper, and tweak the idea. So I think it's just, do I have a self-belief? Yes.
Yes.
We all suffer from, anxiety, from stress, something imposter syndrome. Should we be where we're at? And I think very, very early on, I was like working in a shop, 3 of us in this shop. I was serving customers, picking up the phone to replace stock. And then I might speak to someone from, let's say, Nike, and they were the marketing director of Nike or the marketing director of Adidas. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this person's going to be amazing. And you have a conversation with them and I'd go, well, they weren't that brilliant. So what does that mean? Well, it means they've got to that position. And I think it's being inquisitive and really surrounding yourself with great people.
Because I guess at the end of the day, you're only as good as the team that surrounds you. Do you know what I mean? And if you've got a team that are lifting you up, then there's no problem, is there?
You are absolutely only as good as the team that you have.
Yeah, sure.
And again, in terms of when I was growing up, my father he actually distributed, he bought Reebok, he distributed Reebok shoes. He built a company up from a £250,000 turnover to a 90 million turnover in 5 years. And then 3 years after that, it had a 230 million turnover. So unbelievable growth. And he had someone working for him. And I said, I couldn't work out this bloke. I thought he wasn't very good. And he had 4 people working for him, this bloke did. And one of them became a really good friend of mine. And I thought this bloke was miles better than the bloke who was his boss. And the reality was he was. But what was brilliant about the bloke, the boss, was he knew to surround himself with people better than him. He wasn't worried about that. He wasn't worried they would show him up in a negative way. Yeah. He knew they would show him up in a positive way. And that's about whether you look at something negatively or you look at something positively. We've all got an option. Glass half full or a glass half empty. That's our option. So the option I'll always take is glass half full, always. And always think you've got that option. That's in your power. Yeah.
We've got a question that's come through asking, what is something that really stood out to you that someone said during a job interview when you were the interviewer?
Oh. It's a good question, and I have to say my interview technique is unusual because it's quite unstructured, but it is trying to really get to understand the individual, to understand their values, to understand what they really want, and I think it's more about honesty actually, That's really important to me. Integrity is absolutely key. Do what you say you're going to do. If you make a mistake, look, we all make mistakes, but put your hand up to it. Say, I did that. I'm going to learn from it. We actually get more successful by making mistakes. And I think culturally, that's something in Britain that we struggle with. In America, they are more likely to put money into an entrepreneur who has had a failed business because they know that entrepreneur will have learned, than we are in the UK. We go, oh, someone failed, therefore they failed. Not what a learning experience that would be. It really is. I just think it's about honesty. Really listen to the question. Really go back and look at the advert. Do your research, and you will shine.
Hugh, tell me, what was the best piece of advice that your dad ever gave you?
Wow. It's a good question. I've not been asked that one before. And I haven't talked much about my mum. She was French tennis open champion. She won.
Okay, so best piece of advice from mum and dad. What is something that you've always carried with you?
Try your hardest. I think there will be people that are better than you. There's nothing you can do about that. You can only control yourself. So be the best and get, in terms of get a great coach. So I used to play tennis. I now race motorbikes. And in every sport and in business, have a coach. Have someone that's going to help and support you. And think what Andy Murray. Look at Gareth Southgate at the moment and the people he is surrounding himself with. He's surrounding himself with Sir Dave Brailsford. Cycling, he's surrounding himself with one of the top military people from Sandhurst. He's got a group of people with a divergent experience. Yeah. Because what you want is don't have groupthink. If you surround yourself with people that think the same as you, you will be very, very blinkered in your thought process. And the thing that I learned an enormous amount about was how people would, in business, you always get problems and you think you know the answer. You think you know what the problem is. You immediately pigeonhole it. Oh, I know this one. I've seen it before. Actually, don't do that. Widen your vision. Widen it so that you absolutely can see around yourself and forget what you think you know. Really listen to the person. So I think a great piece of advice also is really learn to listen. We're taught to speak, we're taught to read, we're taught to write. None of us have been taught to listen. So there's a guy called Rob Kendall. He has a couple of books. If you look him up, Rob Kendall, Brainstorming is one of his books, and his Art of Listening and the techniques. I'm absolute rubbish at it compared to what he is. And he's really tried to teach me. So I am very much work in progress. Hope that helps.
Our next question is, what do you usually do on event day? And what does it feel like for you on the day of the marathon itself?
So it should be my easiest day of the year. I should have nothing to do because everything has been done in the 365 days or even longer beforehand. So what do I actually do? I tend to get up about 4:30 in the morning. I go to the start of the race. And actually I go to, there's a place at Greenwich Park where you can look over the city. You can see Canary Wharf. You're seeing mile 6 at Cutty Sark. And I know where the route's going. And the sun comes up at about 5:30 at that time in April. And it's just, I'll have sort of walked around the start and it's just a last check, say hello to the start director, some of his team, just how's it going? But be very, very relaxed. The work has been done. If you in any way, if it hasn't been done, you've had it. And then I'll go from the start. There'll be various interviews, start will happen, start process, but the team are dealing with all of this. I'm just there I'm there to speak to the media if something happens, to speak to them. Then I'll have later on in the day, I'll have speeches to do. So I have to go back, write the speech because it will be about what's happened. And I'll probably finish my day about 9 o'clock that evening, because there's a party where those speeches are on, the elite athletes afterwards, a film of what's gone on the day. So yeah, I've been up since from 4:30 in the morning till 9 at night. And then I will probably get a couple of glasses of wine and collapse in bed. Alcohol is reasonably important in my life.
I can only imagine. It must be
along with exercise.
It must be an amazing sleep. You go to bed after that day, and your heart must just be like lying down. That was the best.
Yeah, I mean, there will be things that have gone on. So the reality of it is, there are things that will have gone on that don't come out in the paper that you're dealing with. That you might have stuff, but it is much more about, it's all about preparation and it wasn't on here, but be prepared. We scenario plan the whole time, all the things that might happen. But we don't concentrate on those. We concentrate on success. And I think this goes back to the stress piece. Too many people focus on what could go wrong. And really in life, that's very rarely where it ends up. Be aware of it, but actually look to where you want to go. I talked about I race motorbikes. If you're on a track, you're not looking at the corner. You're looking past the corner.
Yeah.
You're looking through the corner to where you want to go. If you ski and you look at a tree because you think that tree is dangerous, you'll crash into the tree. You look at the space in between the trees and you will go through it. So look where you really want to go and focus on the positive side of things.
We've got a question asking, how can we run an idea past you?
Email me, not a problem. You can get the details off you. Be delighted to help anybody. Yep, simple as that.
How important are volunteers to London Marathon in sport, in your view?
Unbelievably, absolutely. I mean, we have 4,500 volunteers on the day of the marathon. And volunteers are the lifeblood of sport in this country. I mean, we're talking, I love sport. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's cricket, horse racing, whether it's the football tonight, Tour de France, tennis, you name it, I love it. But without volunteers, I mean, London 2012 and the volunteering, and I've been lucky enough to go to each Olympics from 96 in Atlanta to London 2012. Yeah. And I know you're Australian, but it was the Australian volunteers in Sydney in 2000 who the memory of them dancing, doing ABBA songs on one of the directing us on one of the trains. It's the volunteers that are heart and sport, the heartbeat of any event. And there's a lot of work that we need to do to improve the diversity of our volunteers, to help get more volunteers. But absolutely, they are intrinsic to any event happening, any sports event, any major event.
How important is humor for you in professional life?
This is a good question. And one of the things my wife said is, she said, for God's sake, don't be too serious on this, on what I'm talking about today. So look, whether I inject humor at the appropriate time or the inappropriate time, and everyone's got different levels of humor, but I think it's about loving what you do, having a joy for life. I mean, what an incredible thing that we have to treasure, and how can we make it fulfilling? This goes back to the values. This company, London Marathon Events, any profit we make goes to our charitable trust, who help build sporting infrastructure. And what we want to achieve is some life-changing moments for people, and actually trying to help change society for good. And wow, that is incredible to be able to say that. It's not about, can we make more money? Does money really bring you happiness? It can bring you some happiness, but actually it's getting around in life and doing something that you love and that feeds your soul and gives you a warmth inside you that emanates from you. I've gone off about humor. So anyway, hopefully it does. It helps, because you got to have it in life. You can't be too serious.
Absolutely. Keep on laughing. Okay, forgive me. I'm going to say this name completely wrong. Your team also helped Eliud Kipchoge become the first athlete to run a marathon in under 2 hours, beating the mark by 20 seconds. What was that like for you, that moment?
Yeah, look, I mean, I said about amazing experiences until probably the London Marathon 2020. That was the best experience I've ever been on in terms of, we did that. It was an 8-month project starting in January 2019 and finished on the 12th of October 2019 when he ran 1 hour, 59 minutes and 41 seconds. And it was incredible to be part of the team. And that team was led by Sir Dave Brailsford, who head of Ineos Grenadiers, Tour de France. He's the head of that team. And he led it. There was myself and Valentin Trau, who was Eliud Kipchoge's. He was sort of the management team. And then we had absolute experts in their field. A guy called Robbie Ketchell, a sports scientist, one of my team, a guy called Kevin Nash, who is just a math genius. They measured that course. The accuracy that they had of that course was to within 2 centimeters, using some very advanced technology. We had a car, so the team that were a guy called Peter Vint running the getting involved, McLaren and Mercedes and Audi, in terms of a car that was accurate, driven autonomously, accurate to within 0.1 of a mile an hour. That had never been done before. So it goes back to about surrounding yourself with great people. That was a project that was intense. I said I went on holiday with Dave Brailsford and Valentin. I had a week's holiday in May, and we would have a 1.5-hour conference call every day. And the end result of that conference call was another 1.5 hours of calls. So for 3 hours every day. It wasn't great for my wife and my 2 young kids. But it was an intense experience. And to do it for an athlete like Eliud, who is an incredible human being. He's got a Zen-like sort of life, Zen-like attitude and aura. And again, he is curious. He surrounds himself with amazing people. He's a multimillionaire living a monastic life with all the other athletes. The one bit he is not living on bunk beds, which a lot of the other athletes have. So he does have his own room, but he'll be sweeping out the campus in exactly the same way all the other athletes are. So it was an incredible honor to do it. There it is. Kipchoge, the film, is coming out on Sky. It might have come out. It's coming out shortly, one or the other. It's well worth a watch. And what an amazing man, what an inspiration he is, and to be able to be part of that team, amazing experience.
I've got one last question for you. What is, and this might be a hard one, what is the best thing about your job?
That it's not a job. It's honestly, it's
great.
Not.
Yes, great answer.
It's a passion. It goes back to I love what I'm doing. To be able to say that we have a target to get 500,000 school kids involved in the mini marathon this year. Now that came about from the pandemic last year. The mini marathon normally is 2,500 school kids running, and it's fantastic. They run the last 3 miles of the marathon, but hardly anyone knows it's going on. And then last year, because of the pandemic, we couldn't do it. In 9 days, the team, and again, it goes back to the team, a guy called Ben Cooper, head of schools, brilliant. Penny Dane, Marcom's director, absolutely brilliant. They created a virtual event, and 114,000 school kids in 9 days signed up and completed the 2.6 miles their way from their schools and in their schools. And on using social media, the feedback we got was quite incredible. And that was something that we never, ever, ever expected to do. So once again, it was, okay, well, we can't do it on the streets of London. Let's get a few of us together. What could we do? And, the ideas will come in, and just was an incredible thing to be able to say. And now to be going that we have a target of 500,000 school kids.
And also, just to whoever was asking for Hugh's contact details, we've had a response saying to the person asking for contact details, please tweet at LSE Colleges and we will link up with you to help out. Hugh, on that note, that's going to bring us a wrap for this session. Thank you, everyone, for all of your questions. Thank you for participating and being here to watch. As I've said, I think about 4 times, because I'm full fangirling over you now, Hugh. Thank you so, so, so much for taking the time out of your day to be here with us today. Please, everyone, give it up for Hugh Brasher, Event Director of London Marathon Events. Hope everyone enjoys the rest of the Driving Positive Change, the Importance of Being Bold and Resilient landmark lecture, and have a nice rest of your Wednesday, and go England.
Yeah, thanks very much. Appreciate your time, everybody. Bye-bye.
Take care, Hugh.